in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, what effect, if any, will the government's decision to rescind some Turkish Cypriot passports have on efforts to solve the Cyprus problem?
It's a political message, I think, primarily designed for domestic consumption, to do something in response to the opening of partition.
A new book delves into questions often silenced in the Arab world: identity, belonging, and sexuality.
And he had to come out to his parents, and his mother, the only thing she had to say was, "Madian, are you this?" And she showed a cupped hand, or "Are you this?" And she showed a finger poking, insinuating that if you're the poker, it's okay. And she actually said to him, "If you're the poker, Madian, the homosexual poker, it's okay, you are not a homosexual."
And the Kypria Festival is back, with 2 months of music, dance and drama.
15 different productions which will be shown in 41 performances all over Cyprus.
The headlines this week and social media have been literally awash with the fact that after a cabinet meeting on Monday, it was decided to rescind the Cypriot passports of 14 people who are classed as officials in the occupied area. What does this mean? Is it legal? Let's find out. Joining us to discuss the issue is Hubert Faustman, who's Professor of History and Political Science at the University of Nicosia. I think this took a lot of people, Hubert, by surprise. What's the thinking behind doing this? Because my understanding is that these officials, which include the Turkish Cypriot leader, they haven't actually had their ID cards of the Cyprus Republic rescinded, just their passports.
Exactly. I mean, there was some misunderstanding. Initially, people saw it as the removal of citizenship, which is something you cannot really do unless somebody has a citizenship of another country. You cannot turn somebody stateless, for example. And it's legally a very complicated matter of which I'm also not really an expert. But this was not the case. What they did is basically remove one of the two documents you have for self-identification, which you basically need for travel to some countries, in particular not EU countries. But by leaving them the ID cards, they can still travel, for example, without customs in the European Union. And of course, since they all have the travel documents from Turkey, it just means that if they want to travel to countries that need visa for Turkish citizens, they will have a harder time to get them. So it's more something of an act of harassment and causing difficulties. It's not even a restriction of the freedom of movement or the freedom of travel. So it's a political message, I think, primarily designed for domestic consumption, to do something in response to the opening of partition.
Is it going to come back and bite us? Because it's quite obvious from the reaction in the north that, well, certainly from the people who've been affected by this, they're pretty angry, I think. But then I saw a quote by former Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akinci saying that Ersin Tatar, the current leader, should be ashamed of the fact that he was saying ages ago he was going to hand in his Cypriot passport, and now it's been taken from him. He's complaining.
Exactly. I think that the initial response was fear that this could be done to Turkish Cypriots in general, and the government here in the south was at pains to clarify that this is a limited measure directed against specific politicians who are involved in acts that violate international law. If this stands in the courts of the Republic, which they can go to, or the European Court of Human Rights, it's going to be a very interesting question, and it needs my knowledge to what extent this will stand. But it might divide the Turkish Cypriots in the similar way that it divided the Greek Cypriot community over the return of Varosha. So it's an act of political revenge and harassment, as I said earlier, on some politicians in the north. And I think even the public here in the south will feel to some degree they deserve it by doing what they have done, given that we are in an atmosphere of nasty provocation of each other, of which is the newest round, is what we are talking about.
Well, we do just seem to be going further and further down the road towards separation and therefore partition, don't we?
That we do anyway. I mean, it was clear even before this latest round that this island is heading for partition, or at least that since in my view at least, none of the three core parties involved in resolving the conflict, the Turkish government, the Turkish Cypriot authorities, and the Greek Cypriot side, is seriously interested in the kind of solution that is feasible, that we're heading for a status quo, which for the continuation of the status quo, and things getting worse in the process of mutual provocations and escalations, and trying to create facts that lead us to a two-state solution in the long run. On that path, anyway, it's just another nasty twist. I don't expect any changes or any prospects for anything positive prior to 2023 anyway, when we have elections in Turkey and then we have elections in the south, and then maybe there is an option for something more positive and constructive. Until then, I expect just more of this nastiness and provocations.
What I think is interesting as well is that I was reading recently that people who cross over into the north are now having to show their documents to the police on our side, whereas previously they only had to show them on the other side. And it was suggested that this was in effect a border check.
Well, from what I understood, but I would have to recheck, it was also justified with COVID measures. And in that context, it's not a regulation that has been implemented consistently. It was done upon instruction, so it's done now. It can be revoked, but it makes it feel more like a crossing. In the past, you were sometimes controlled and sometimes not controlled. So you can make the same argument that sometimes they pretended that these were border procedures, sometimes not. But the Greek Cypriots are pains not to make these border procedures. But of course, it feels like it, and it adds to this border perception. But I think in international law, as long as the Republic of Cyprus and the international community does not recognize this as a border, it's not going to be in a legal sense a real border control. It's a government controlling its citizens moving to another area. It's legally complicated, but I think you would read too much into it than if you could turn it into a de facto maybe, but in a de jure border procedure. It can be revoked and then it continues like we all know it, that they usually wave you through.
And you did mention earlier that the people who have had their passports rescinded or won't be renewed can take the legal course. Now, of course, here in Cyprus, that could take, 7, 8, 10 years?
I think that's the idea. I mean, the government knows exactly that even if what they do is unlawful, which I'm not sure if it is or it is not, the harassment element in this will be implemented for years to come, because the legal system is notoriously slow, as you pointed out. And let's say even if the Turkish Cypriots lose and then go to the European Court of Human Rights, you add another couple of years on top of it. So as an effective measure, it will harass those Turkish Cypriot officials for years to come, no matter if it's legally correct or not.
And undermines all the efforts over the years to try and bring the two sides closer together. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Hubert Faustman, Professor of History and Political Science at the University of Nicosia, thanks for enlightening us.
Thank you, Rosie.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
A book launch, for Cyprus at least, and a reading is taking place at the CVAR on the 15th of September. It's about a book that's called Are You This? Or Are You This? It's written by Ellen Georgiou, who joins us now. Ellen, this is really about gender and identity, I think I'm right in saying. So can you give us the background as to how the book came about?
Yeah, Madian Al Jazeera is a friend of mine. We've been friends for 30 years. And when he came out to his mother, and he had to come out to her because his life was in danger, and he had to leave Oman, and he had to come out to his parents. And his mother, the only thing she had to say was, Madian, are you this? And she showed a cupped hand. Or are you this? And she showed a finger poking, and insinuating that if you're the poker, it's okay. And she actually said to him, if you're the poker, Madian, the homosexual poker, it's okay, you are not a homosexual. And you can marry and have children. So are you this or are you this? When he told me this, I said, oh my goodness, that's a title for a book. But the book is not really about the sexual act. The book is about who are you? Who are you, Madian Al Jazeera? Are you a Palestinian? Well, what is that? You know, yes, I'm a Palestinian, but what does that mean? It's not where I'm from. Are you an Arab? Well, yes, I'm an Arab, but I have a British accent and I'm blonde and blue-eyed. Are you a Muslim? Yes, I'm a Muslim, but I do not embrace the Islam of today. Are you a gay man? Yes, I'm a gay man, but I still live in the shade as a gay Arab. So Are You This or Are You This is a memoir, and it is about his life, but it deals with many, many issues.
And when you said this should be the title of a book, what was his reaction? Did he embrace the idea of telling his story?
Well, what he said was, yeah, you're right. It's a great title for a book. And I've actually written a few chapters. And I said, you have? And then he says, well, yeah, I have an idea for a book because I've got so many stories in my life. And I said, could you send me the chapters? And he did. And I always say he can't write a shopping list because it was not good. And I said, Madiane, how about I write a few chapters, starting with that conversation you had with your mother, which was quite profound, really. You know, are you this or are you this? And then she brings it up again in front of the family because she still thinks if you're on top, you know, you're not a homosexual. And she was desperate for him to be normal, or what her sense of normal is. So, yeah.
So he embraced the idea, and then you wrote the chapters, and then what? Basically,
Well, what
did you
happened was-
ghostwrite it?
No, I did not ghostwrite it. He came to my home in Los Angeles and he sat with me for 3 or 4 days at a time, and he came 3 times. And he sat and I recorded him, and then he left, and he's very articulate and animated when he's talking. And I recorded everything, and then I crafted the book. It was really a question of what goes where and just writing it and stringing it together.
How long did it take?
It didn't take very long at all, and I hate to say this because people struggle to write books, but with me, I just felt it was a book that had to be, because it's like it wrote itself. It was a very easy process, the process of recording, and it's a memoir, so it's personal. And there was some back and forth, but I found that he was much better in the room with me, as opposed to him trying to write something himself. He couldn't do that. It was an easy process. I would say a few months.
Now, if we go back to when you actually met him, you said you've known him for 30-odd years.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. How did your paths cross in the first place?
We met at university. We were in our 20s, and we clicked immediately. This was an American university. And we clicked, and we remained friends after graduation, after getting on with our lives. And he would always pop up in my life. And it was a very strong friendship. Now, the book just came up. You know, I think his mother helped write the book in a way, because with her saying, are you this or are you this, and me thinking it was catchy, and him really wanting, because he's also a gay activist, so he has a lot to say about being a homosexual in the Arab world, and also helping people that really need a voice.
It does seem to me strange that homosexuality in the Arab world is frowned on by some people, but widely accepted, particularly if it's paedophilia, in other sectors. And then if we look at Cypriot society, we're not that far, are we, from the Middle East? We're still very much trying to come to terms as a society with the LGBT movement.
Well, Madiane actually addresses this in the book. He was sexually molested at 6. And it's in the book, by a relative. And what he's saying is, this is not, just intrinsic to the Arab world, because this is everywhere, of course. But in the Arab culture, as in the Cyprus culture, doors are open, uncles are encouraged, cousins sleep over. And there's like an open door policy with uncles coming in and out. And he was sexually abused by an uncle at 6. But he also deals with bromance. Bromance is very strong in the Arab world, very strong, because in the absence of women at weddings, women at parties, men sing and dance, and they hold hands in the street, and it's acceptable. And sometimes that does go further.
So it's a very...
Fine line.
Yes.
It's a very fine line.
Now, what reaction are you expecting, if any, from the book reading that's going to occur at the CVAR?
Well, I have to say that the book is not only about homosexuality in the Arab world, it's a memoir. So the book really is also about his tribe, his mother, his father, his siblings. His aunties play a wonderful, strong role, these eccentric aunties who support him. His mother is one of 5 women that went to boarding schools. Palestinian women. So they are true. They went to German boarding schools, which is what is now Israel. And they are true matriarchs and respected and admired. And I love that in the book. That's part of the book's strength, I think, really, the role that women play as well. I don't think it's a controversial book. Maybe for a Muslim, we've invited Queer Cyprus to come from the north. So there are a lot of, queer Muslims. So maybe for that, it would be controversial and more needs to be done in that arena. But it's a book that's also quite tender.
And of course it will be on sale at that launch on the 15th of September.
I would like to add one thing. I would like to thank CVAR for hosting the event, the Gostas and Rita Severis Foundation, and the British High Commission in Nicosia have just embraced this and are giving phenomenal support. So I think it's going to be a very warm and embracing environment.
We've been talking to Ellen Yorgiou about the book Are You This? Or Are You This? A story of identity and worth. You can join them at the CVAR at 7:30 on September the 15th if you'd like to find out more.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
In other news this week, the Employers and Industrialists Federation and the Chamber of Commerce have signalled that there is an acute shortage of labour, particularly in the hospitality industry and our hotels. They're asking for an expansion of the areas in which students are allowed to work part-time. And the coronavirus is never far away. News this week that the government may be considering, and certainly the advisory committee is recommending, that booster shots be given particularly to the elderly and the vulnerable, as cases are shooting up and hospitalisations of the older members of society are again on the rise. They say that a booster may be necessary before the flu season starts in the autumn and winter, and this may be considered even before the European Medicines Agency recommends such a move. And while we're on the subject of health, the other story still making the news is that of doctors who've been operating with false certification. In other words, they're not doctors at all. There are 3 cases being investigated at the moment, including those of people who have supposedly issued false vaccination certificates.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
We've all been starved of culture over the last year or so, but it's great news to hear that the Kypria Festival, which has now been running for, well, since the early 90s for sure, is coming back. It's coming back next week, so it's a pleasure to welcome to this week's programme Andy Bargili, who is the artistic director. Andy, it's been a tough time for everybody, I think, in the arts. How have you managed over the planning of this one, because you managed something last year, but there is a relaxation and you're allowed more people in the audience, I think, this year?
Yes, the more people allowed to attend the performances this year is a relaxation too, yes, but we are still having hard times to organize it because we have so many restrictions considering the origin of some performances, if we are allowed or not allowed to have big groups from some countries, and taking into consideration all these difficulties, it has been a very difficult time for us to organize everything. So,
nevertheless, you have put together a very extensive program.
Yes, that includes 15 different productions, which will be shown in 41 performances all over Cyprus. And as you already said, next week we are starting on the 4th of September with one very attractive for all family performances with the wonderful Luigi Ciotta from Italy. It's a performance named Tutti in Valigia, everything in a suitcase, and it's a performance of physical theatre, clown and circus trickery with an interactive attitude. And this is open to access. No ticket is required to attend.
Free performance.
It's free for everybody, but it's required to have a reservation.
So you know the numbers.
Know the numbers and who is coming and if he is vaccinated or not, because we have very strict protocols and we will have people there to control everybody who is entering. So they have to make their reservation through the platform of www.tickethour.com.cy.
And I presume that means that, from what you've said, that's suitable for children.
Yes, especially for children. It's only a 35-minute long show, but it's very attractive and very funny, and I'm sure that everybody will get a lot of pleasure watching this wonderful performance. I'm talking about children, about parents, about grandparents, about everybody. And then we have our big production. It's actually a co-production of our festival with the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra. It's a world premiere of the opera of Andis Skordis, Argos Sidiros, Crude Iron, if we have to translate it. And it's a contemporary opera that is based on Sophroniou book, who has written also the libretto. And it's a delusional journey emphasizing on memory, death and time. It's a big production.
Contemporary music.
Contemporary production. It's world premiere and a very, very promising production. And then we have the comedy by Ken Ludwig, Baskerville, a Sherlock Holmes mystery. It's a parody on the well-known
Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yes. So it's presented by Alpha Square and directed by Andreas Araouzos. And then we have songs, protest songs. Songs, they have been composed covering the social change around the world, protesting about obsessive regimes and about human rights, women's rights, diversity and so on and so on. And it's supervised by Robert Kamasa, and the artistic direction is of Christos Philippou.
So are those new protest songs, or are they...
No. It's, they are very well-known protest songs from all over the world, including Bob Dylan, John Lennon, and other very well-known composers that everybody...
And very apposite at this time, because there is so much happening in the world that it does bring to light the fact that art does have a comment to say on society.
Yes. And this is a very, very important role of art, if I may say. And then we have the Bake by Euripides. It's a Greek production that has been recently presented at the famous Epitaurus Festival, directed by Niketi Kondouri and starring Akis Sakellariou, Odysseas Papaspiliopoulos, Ioanna Papa and others, very well-known actors all over, and it will be performed only in Nicosia due to technical specifications and restrictions. After that we have the awarded Messier Doumani with their latest work named Pissourin. There are 9 original compositions in Cypriot dialect, and it's an album of music that explores the night through a philosophical existential prism. And this will be performed in Paphos, Limassol and Derinia.
And of course, Monsieur Doumani have a big following here in Cyprus and all over the world.
All over the world, yes. They are a fantastic group, and they're very original and very well accepted everywhere, all over the world. And then we have another one, musical performance. It's jazz this time, and is named From Swing to Bebop. It's performed by the Miaris Trio, jazz trio, featuring Ofer Landsberg from Israel, the famous solist Ofer Landsberg, and composer. And it's a performance where the adaptations of jazz standards meet Ofer Landsberg's new orchestrations and compositions. Then we have another musical performance, is named Ai confini dello Ionio, to the edge of the Ionian Sea. It's from Greece and Italy, and it's the group Engardia with Anna Cinzia Villani and Claudia Gianotta. They will perform traditional songs in Greco. It's the Greek dialect of South Italy.
I didn't know they spoke Greek in South Italy.
Yes, there are very many villages, and they have a very specific way how to pronounce the Greek, and they have wonderful songs and dances. And this will be presented in Nicosia and in Limassol. And then we have the Rose. It's a play by Martin Sherman, performed by Despin and Bepedelli, and directed by Nikos Karageorgos. It's a production that has been already presented 2 years ago in Athens at Yalino Theatro with great success, and we succeeded to get the rights to perform it also in our festival.
And I think that's been performed by Olympia Dukakis here in English.
Yes, true, at La Cha.
Yeah.
Yes.
And does that wrap up the performances?
No, we have many more.
Run through them quickly for us.
Yes, a very quick run through. So then we have the Contemporary Music Orchestra Overt of the Greek radio television, the magic of cinema music with well-known melodies composed by Ennio Morricone, Henry Mancini, Nino Rota and other famous composers. Then we have a very nice theatre production for children, Savel's Red Dress. It's a play about children refugees that they have to
very
live.
apposite at this time.
Yes. A play that everybody should see. Children and parents and grandparents and everybody. Then we have another theatre play, Kostis Palamas, directed and performed by Grigoris Valtinos, the famous Grigoris Valtinos. We have Historian de un Amor, a music production with Vakia Stavru, Manolis Neophytou and Nicolas Efthimiou. Then we are very proud to say that we have the latest creation of Antonis Foniadakis, the famous, world-famous Greek choreographer, named Salema Revisited, and we got the permission to have the 2 special performances in Nicosia before the world premiere at Megaron in Athens. And the last one, it's another one, world premiere, is the chamber opera by Vassos Argyridis and Tim Welton, 3 women, with soloist Katerina Mina, who is a Cypriot soprano living in London.
Very well
known here. And it's about 3 legendary heroines, Medea, Antigone and Hecuba.
It sounds like it's a really packed programme, so we should send people, I think, to the website, which is Kypria, kypria.org.cy. You can see, if you go there, the whole list of events and where to book your tickets or reserve them if you're going to one of those free concerts. Andy Badgili, Artistic Director of the 2021 Kypria Festival, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for your support.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.